Ever found yourself in a situation where the ticking clock seems to echo louder than your thoughts? Waiting can be a struggle, I'm sure you can relate. In this fast-paced world where we're used to getting what we want when we want it, we're often left wrestling with the agonizing game of waiting. Whether it's waiting for a job promotion, waiting for the right partner to get married, or waiting for a breakthrough in a challenging situation, the struggle is real. Because some of us hate to wait, and on the contrary, God is on no hurry. This truth of the matter is, God has his own timepiece. A clock that doesn't chime to the beat of our impatience, but instead ticks in harmony with a grander plan. Trust God with the timing of your life, because his clock is perfect, impeccable, and always on time. Let's take a moment to delve deeper into this idea. God's timing isn't wired to our demand for instant gratification. Instead, it's attuned to a divine schedule, a heavenly agenda that we, as humans, may not always understand. It's like a puzzle where each piece fits perfectly, not when we force it, but when it's the right time. But here's the catch. God's clock doesn't always chime in sync with ours. In fact, sometimes it feels as though it's not ticking at all. Even when we're in a hurry, even when our patience is wearing thin, his clock just keeps ticking at its own steady pace. However, before we let frustration seep in, let's remember this. Just as a baker knows the exact moment when the bread is perfectly baked and a gardener understands the precise second to pick the ripened fruit, God, the creator of time itself, knows the perfect moment for everything under the sun. So the next time you find yourself wrestling with the ticking clock, remember this. You're not just waiting. You're nestled within the grand symphony of life, orchestrated by God, the divine conductor. Just like a perfectly timed symphony, every note of our lives falls into place under the baton of God's timing. Consider the story of Lazarus, a tale not just of death and resurrection, but a profound lesson in divine timing. Lazarus, a man from Bethany, was gravely ill, and his sisters Mary and Martha sent word to Jesus, pleading for his intervention. However, Jesus did not rush to their side. He waited until Lazarus had passed away, and by the time Jesus arrived in Bethany, Lazarus had been dead for 4 days. Mary and Martha were heartbroken and confused. They could not understand why Jesus, their dear friend, had not come sooner. Martha, in her anguish, confronted Jesus, saying, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." It was a cry of despair, a cry that echoed their disappointment in what seemed like a delay in divine intervention. But Jesus was not perturbed. He understood something that Mary and Martha didn't. God's timing is always perfect. He reassured Martha, "Did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God?" And then in a moment that would forever be etched in the records of faith, Jesus did the unthinkable. He called out to Lazarus, who had been dead for 4 days, and Lazarus came out of the tomb alive. This moment was not just a miracle, it was a testament to God's perfect timing. Jesus could have healed Lazarus when he was sick, but he chose to wait. He chose to wait because his delay was not a denial, but a divine setup for a greater miracle. Even in the face of death, God's timing remained impeccable. Lazarus's resurrection was not late, it was divinely punctual. It was a powerful reminder that when God seems 4 days late, he is still on time. His timing may not align with our expectations, but it aligns perfectly with his divine plan. And when we trust in his timing, we witness the glory of God in ways we could never have imagined. Imagine finding yourself in God's waiting room, a place where time seems to stand still and patience is the only currency. This isn't your typical waiting room with outdated magazines and a ticking clock. No, this is a place of introspection, a place of surrender, a place where faith is often tested and where trust is earned. In our lives, we all encounter moments that feel like God's waiting room. It could be the anticipation of a marriage proposal, the desire to start a family, the eagerness to step out of your parents' home and claim independence, or the anxiety of waiting for a career breakthrough. Waiting on God is undoubtedly one of the most challenging aspects of our faith journey, yet human nature is programmed to be in a haste to achieve significant milestones. We are creatures of habit, of routine, and of comfort. We crave control and predictability. We like to set our own timelines, plan our paths, and control our narratives. But God's timeline, it's a different time zone altogether. This tension between our innate impatience and divine timing is where our faith is often shaped. We grapple with questions, doubts, and fears, wondering if God hears our pleas, if he sees our struggles. We question his timing, his silence, and his seeming inaction. But it's in this struggle, in this waiting, that our faith is refined. God's waiting room is a place of spiritual growth where we learn to yield our frantic timelines to his divine plan. It's where we learn to trade our impatience for trust, our doubts for faith, and our anxiety for peace. It's where we learn to embrace the mystery of his ways, acknowledging that his plans are far higher than ours. In God's waiting room, we learn to surrender our plans, our timing, our control. And in this surrender, we find our strength. Strength to endure, strength to hope, and strength to trust in his perfect timing. In God's waiting room, faith is refined, trust is deepened, and surrender becomes our strength. What happens when the stage lights dim and God's work becomes unseen? Can we trust his behind-the-scenes orchestration? This question often echoes in our minds as we navigate the winding paths of life. It's one thing to trust God when we can visualize his hand at work, but it's another to have faith when his divine operation is hidden from our sight. Indeed, the challenge of trusting God's work, especially when it's not immediately visible, is a struggle many of us grapple with. It's akin to watching a play, and when the curtain falls to hide the scene changes, we are left in anticipation, unaware of what's transpiring behind the veil. Similarly, in our lives, God often works behind the curtain in ways that we can't see or understand. However, just because we can't see his work, it doesn't mean that God isn't actively involved in our lives. On the contrary, he is continuously at work, weaving together every aspect of our lives with threads of grace, wisdom, and love. Even when we can't perceive his hand, we can be assured that he is orchestrating our circumstances for our good and his glory. This trust stems from the understanding that God is not only the author of our lives, but also the perfect finisher. His work doesn't cease when our circumstances become challenging or when we can't discern his plans. Instead, he works tirelessly, molding us, shaping us, and preparing us for the grandeur that lies ahead. In the stillness of the waiting room, when our prayers seem unanswered and the future appears uncertain, we are called to trust in God's behind-the-scenes work. We are encouraged to remember that he is the divine writer, and every event in our lives is a part of his magnificent script. His plans are always to prosper us, his thoughts towards us is of peace and not evil. Jeremiah 29:11. So in those moments of doubt and uncertainty, let's remind ourselves of God's unfailing love and his promise to work all things for our good. Let's cultivate a heart of trust, knowing that even when we can't see his hand, we can trust his heart. When the path ahead is obscured, trust that God is diligently working backstage, preparing a grand entrance for your good. As we navigate the corridors of time, how can we harness the power of divine punctuality in our impatient world? In our journey so far, we've plumbed the depths of waiting, revisited the poignant story of Lazarus, stepped into God's waiting room, and peered behind the scenes of God's mysterious workings. Each of these scenes underscores a powerful truth. God's timing, although different from ours, is always perfect. The struggle with waiting is a universal human experience, but it's in these moments of patience testing delay that we find opportunities for growth and transformation. We learn to surrender our carefully crafted plans and timelines to God's infinite wisdom. We learn to trust, not in the ticking of our own clocks, but in the divine punctuality of God's. The story of Lazarus teaches us that God's delay is not God's denial. Even when our circumstances seem dead and stinking like Lazarus in the tomb, God can breathe life into them in his perfect timing. Jesus didn't show up when Mary and Martha wanted him to, but his arrival was right on time for a miracle. In God's waiting room, we are invited to be still and wait on the Lord. It's a space where faith is refined, trust is deepened, and the human inclination to control is surrendered to God's sovereignty. Psalm 27:14 encourages us, "Wait on the Lord, be of good courage, and he shall strengthen thine heart." Wait, I say on the Lord. Even when we can't see the way and it seems like God isn't answering our prayers, we can trust that he's working behind the scenes. Romans 8:28 assures us that, and we know that all things works together for good, to them that love God, to them who are called according to his purpose. So dear friends, as you traverse the winding paths of life, remember to embrace the wait. Surrender your timeline to God's. Trust His perfect timing. Remember, God's timing is never late. In the grand scheme of life, every minute is aligned with His divine plan and will for our lives. So trust God. My dear friends, His timing is always perfect. Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more inspirational and motivational videos.